to our attention that an artist who worked on Marathon took elements from a graphic designer without permission or acknowledgement and placed them on a decal sheet that was then checked in 2020. The decal sheet included icons and text elements. These elements ended up in our alpha build, and there's absolutely no excuse for this oversight. And we are working on and 100% committed to our review process to ensure instances like this don't happen again on Marathon or at Bungie.
Bungie is absolutely screwed and Marathon is dead. Bungie has been caught stealing again. And for those who are counting, this is now, I believe, the fourth time they've done something like this in a fairly short period of time for what amounts to be a massive company paid billions of dollars by Sony to purchase. And they can't seem to come up with anything original. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Smash JT. And Bungie's Marathon is in full damage control mode right now, with the directors and the creators of the game trying to talk about the game and bring some information to the community about it. But they were overrun with comments in the chat talking about plagiarism, because obviously people aren't going to just ignore that and pretend nothing happened when they were caught red-handed stealing straight up posters from an artist from years ago without giving any credit or compensation to them. And yeah, I really don't think there's any coming back from this. JT. Hit that subscribe, give me a like, and check out smashjt.com for the full article breaking down how Bungie is absolutely screwed, as if more couldn't go wrong for Sony-owned divisions after they shut down Firewalk Studios and completely canned Concord. We now see Bungie's Marathon being caught up in a clear-cut plagiarism scandal. And there's no getting out of this one. As someone who's been following Bungie for years, and even going so far as to say I've been rooting for them, specifically back in the earlier days of Halo, through the ups and downs of even Destiny and beyond, now the latest scandal we have going on is not just disappointing, it looks to be the final nail in the coffin for them. Bungie is 100% cooked. Now, I already had some skepticism going into Marathon, but I was like, you know what? You never know what you're going to get out of it. Maybe there'll be some sort of play mechanic in it that will surprise people. They'll be like, oh, this is why the game's unique and special. Now I see why we need to pay $40+ for a looter shooter in a field that's full of free-to-play, very established titles that are already out there that people are playing right now. Okay, yeah, this does have a chance to succeed. No, that was already a big hurdle to overcome in the first place. Now with the plagiarism scandal, nope. It's all done. Games can fail for all sorts of reasons, but here we have a very unique use case. No, not for bad balancing or botched live service management, not even for another soulless cash grab, although that one is a little bit debatable, like I said. No, this time it's for stealing artwork. Now, multiple times from independent artists who are barely out there scraping by while Bungie is cashing Sony's checks and burns whatever's left of their disintegrating credibility. Even Bungie's art director is currently trying to explain this all away as some sort of misunderstanding because it's just, an old employee that doesn't work here anymore, and that stuff came through and we didn't have the checks and balances in place, and we didn't know that this no-name, no-existing employee that we are just trust us, bro, they exist. We didn't know that they brought this stuff in here, and it was definitely all them, and they're definitely not with us anymore, and it's all completely focused on that one person that nobody even knows who it is.
And so to that extent, I want to send my personal apology to Antireal, whose work was used in this case. And I know how unfair this feels, and we're doing everything we can to make this right with her. Her work is fantastic, and we clearly share mutual appreciation for a specific genre of graphic design, and it's very exciting, and I'm excited to have folded that into our style in general. So thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience.
Now, listening to this, I can't help but think that they are conveniently blaming all of this stealing, theft, and plagiarism on this no-name employee that conveniently no longer works at Bungie, but they don't name who it is. But it sounds like they know who it is, but they're not giving a name. They're not telling people who it was. And this is the same Bungie that was caught straight up stealing and plagiarizing. So if that's the case, why can't they tell us who it is? Because I have a really hard time just taking their word for it, trusting them and believing them that it wasn't this Joe Across guy. Why should anyone just take their word for it if they're not giving a name for people to know who actually did it? The artist, who is known as N2 or Antireal, took to X to try to let people know that entire chunks from 2017 poster designs were completely stolen and plastered all over Marathon's alpha without any credit or notice or permission, or, and some could argue this as being the most important one to the conversation, no compensation whatsoever. Bungie has since confirmed this happening, blaming it conveniently on a former employee and saying that they're going to launch a formal review process throughout the entire company to make sure this doesn't happen again. Because apparently the first 4 times weren't enough. So the 5th time, it definitely is going to happen here. N2 took to X saying, I don't have the resources nor the energy to spare to pursue this legally, but I've lost count on the number of times a major company has deemed it easier to pay a designer to imitate or steal my work than write me an email. Billion on Blue Sky said, Bungie should educate Joseph Across, the person who is the art director for Marathon, and said, when you are stealing someone's posters, make sure you erase Antireal's name from the texture. Left is an asset spread out throughout the game on various elements, and on the right, there's Antireal Daily Series. And you can see how they tried to mitigate copying this one for one by blurring a little bit of the name, but it's still there, and it's still clearly stolen. These aren't just similarities or coincidences, they are copy-paste jobs used without permission, and in Bungie's next big tentpole title, they all got caught because players in Alpha recognized the designs. Like, that's how blatant it was. It was something where people were like, hey, I've actually seen this before. There's an artist that did this. Did they pay them for it? Turns out, nope. This isn't Bungie's first offense either. We have Raid Southern saying, I don't think I've ever talked about it publicly, but this isn't the first time this happened. I had my work ripped off in 2012 when concepts from Destiny leaked. And looking at the image that was shared, you can see clearly that there are pictures that are painted over or traced over because there's zero originality left at Bungie right now, and they think that they can just trace over someone else's original artwork, and it's their own thing. Kind of like what Alana Pierce was doing, but I digress. They were also sued for allegedly stealing Destiny 2's Red War story and conveniently can't defend themselves because that content was vaulted. Or how they took inspiration from Julian Fiola saying, I just realized that Bungie took inspiration from my piece for this week's cutscene. Certainly took me by surprise when I watched the cutscene, which, yikes, Bungie, like holy crap. Can you pay some actual creative and original people to create something instead of just bring people in and look for artwork that's made by someone else and slap that into your game? And one of the most egregious examples, they also copied a fan's Ace of Spades Nerf gun design down to the last scratch. This comes from Tofu Rabbit saying, hey Bungie, so the Nerf Ace of Spades directly lifts a commission I did in 2015. This is not similar or a coincidence. You can see my same brush strokes and scratches / smudges. And when you zoom in on the image, it becomes painfully obvious that they literally just stole this person's work and slapped their own color design on it and called it a day. And now we have Marathon is just a collage of ripped off indie artwork. N2 said, the Marathon Alpha released recently and its environments are covered with assets lifted from poster designs I made in 2017. And he tags Bungie and Joseph Across. And something that I found out while doing more research on this is, curiously, Joseph Across was following N2 or Antireal on X for years. And Antireal said, no, I've never had any communication with Joseph Across. And it's not too wild to say that Joseph Across could have been the person that came across and stumbled upon these designs and pulled them into the game himself, instead of blaming it on some no-name employee that no longer works at Bungie anymore. It's not a one-time oops. This is an established pattern, and no amount of PR-friendly statements or thorough reviews is going to fix any of that, even though, of course, they are desperately trying and in full damage control as we speak right now. This is one of the biggest stories of 2025, and I think Bungie knows it. The game was already in trouble. Let's be honest, Marathon already looked like a failed experiment from the jump. I already had my concerns going into it, looking like a soulless extraction shooter with no identity, no audience, and pretty much zero interest from the vast majority of the gaming community, that they wanted to charge money to buy and play in a field of games that are already established looter shooters that are already free to play made absolutely no sense and brought up the same exact questions people already had when Concord launched and tried to do the very same thing. Now, people could blame the Concord designs of the characters on why the game failed. You could blame it on charging people for the money. You could blame it on the game just overall being created with woke elements in it. Whatever you want to say, it's probably a combination of a whole bunch of things. You could divide it up however you want. Fact is, Concord failed miserably, and now we're looking over at Marathon, a game that clearly has had hundreds of millions of dollars allegedly poured into the development of it. The game hasn't even launched yet, and it is being mired in allegations of plagiarism. And it's not even allegations at this point, because Bungie has admitted straight up that, yep, they stole them. Marathon dev team on X said, "We immediately investigated a concern regarding unauthorized use of artist decals in Marathon and confirmed that a former Bungie artist included these in a texture sheet that was ultimately used in-game." And they go on with a very long thread talking about why this is something that they didn't mean to do, and it was definitely an accident. They're gonna check into fixing it. But ultimately, all of this is lip service, and the wildest part about it is Bungie themselves are admitting that they straight up stole it, and they're hoping that they can just brush this under the rug. This was supposed to be Bungie's next big thing. Instead, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And Sony, who acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion with a B, has to be kicking themselves right now. The trust is completely gone. The community has turned against Bungie, and honestly, looking at the situation for what it is, I can't really say I blame anybody for turning against the company, because you just don't do this kind of stuff. How many times does the community have to notice that you're plagiarizing straight up out of artists that are working hard, not being compensated for the work they're doing, and then you guys are just playing it off like no big deal, hoping you don't get caught. And when you do, it's like, oops, yeah, we're going to try to figure this out because we got caught, not because we actually feel sorry about it. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. If you guys want more information, check out smashjt.com for the full article. I will link this in the description below. If you appreciate what I'm doing, hit that join button. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, you stay smashing.
We're going to be discussing a lot about what we learned through Alpha, some of the plans that we're going forward with. But before we get into that, Joe crosses some sort of topic that he wants to talk to you all about.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. And hey, everyone. I'm Joe Cross, franchise art director of Marathon. Yeah, and wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the events from yesterday. It came to our attention, and sorry, I wrote this. I wanted to make sure I get this message right. Smash JT. Smash JT. Smash JT. Smash JT. Smash JT.